Welcome to E2 Talks. Today we're going to be looking at how to maintain focus on our mission. Leadership is all about mission. We used to say phrases like, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Stephen Covey advised us that we had to understand what thing comes first to make sure that first things come first. I was reading a book once called The 4 Disciplines of Execution that talked about why certain organizations, institutions, businesses, civic organizations were able to achieve more rapidly than other institutions. And it said it is because they had a WIG, a wildly important goal. Notice, singular. They were trying to accomplish one thing. You see, we have to maintain focus on our singular mission, or we will begin to drift. I have spoken at a church camp near Bergholz, Ohio. This church camp is a wonderful place, but as I traveled to it, I actually lost GPS signal. When I finally found the church camp, I asked them, how many people get lost around here? They kind of chuckled and they said, yeah, it's kind of common to lose your GPS signal, but airplane pilots know exactly where we are. And I said, what do you mean? He said, anybody who has ever had to fly into Pittsburgh, the signal light, the signal that goes to the aircraft for them to get a bearing check before making their final approach to Pittsburgh, is in Bergholz. So every airline pilot knows to look for that signal to get its bearing straight, to know that it's going in the right direction, to know that it's making the right decision in order to land at Pittsburgh. I want to talk about the church and its leadership needing to stay focused on mission, needing to focus on that signal that says, here is why we exist. By the way, it's very easy to do an exercise with your leadership to see if you are staying on signal, if mission really is being maintained. Simply look at your last 6 months of elders meeting minutes. How many times was the mission discussed? How many times was the mission read or brought up in discussion? How many times when a decision was made did somebody ask the all-important question, how does that really help us achieve our mission? The more prevalent those kind of comments are and conversations are in those minutes, the more focused you are on mission. But when, frankly, mission becomes an assumption, that's when we begin to get in danger. You see, there are 4 basic dangers that distract us from being mission-focused. First is when we assume that mission drift simply won't happen. You see, it's a danger to think we won't ever get off mission. You see, leaders are the guardian of mission. It's our responsibility to make sure the bride of Christ stays on target. And when we are unaware or we do not expect mission drift to occur, then we do not stand guard against it. So my first statement is we need to assume that mission drift is going to happen and be on guard for it. Another danger is simply this: what is our rationale for what we do? You see, we need to know why we do certain things, why we make certain decisions, and ultimately that why has to be found in our mission. You see, when we start making decisions as leaders that are apart from the mission of the church, when we start saying, well, what's the most practical? We don't really mean practical solution, we mean pragmatic. We think getting rid of the problem is the solution, instead of saying we need to make a decision about an issue that helps us advance our mission. And that requires a whole nother level of thought, not to mention a whole level of commitment to our mission. because without it, we simply become pragmatists. Another danger we need to be aware of is what Stephen Covey called sharpening the saw. I won't go into his illustration, but he simply spoke of people who became so busy at doing what they've always done, they never stop to ask, are we actually achieving anything with everything we are doing? When we start settling for efficiency instead of effectiveness, when we start settling for simply being busy rather than seeing that the kingdom advances, we're in danger of losing focus on our mission. I've actually brought this up with a church before, and they opened up their church calendar and they said, but look at all the things we have going on. And yet when I showed them and asked, how does this relate to your church's mission? How does this help seek and save the lost? How does this build disciples? They really didn't know. A fourth danger is simply this. When we become shotguns rather than rifles. When we say things like, we have 17 strategic initiatives instead of one main mission. We become spread out. We take the church's resources, people, tithe, talents, and we spread them so thin across 17 objectives when in fact we need to have how many? One wildly important goal. One first thing that comes first. The main thing is to keep the main thing, and yet many times we're too spread out. And we lose focus. So what are some practices that can keep us focused on mission? Let's look at 4 of them. Number 1, we need to reinforce the mission. Actively reinforce the mission. I've brought this up with an eldership before, and they said, well, we do reinforce the mission. It's hanging on the wall right over there. Yes, but is the mission really integrated into everything you do? Is there time dedicated on a regular basis to examine the mission and ask the question, are we really fulfilling it? How devoted are we to the mission? We need to reinforce it, not simply have it hung on a wall. Secondly, we need to make the mission measurable. We have to say, this is what we are trying to achieve as a congregation, and if we are really achieving it, if we are really making progress on fulfilling that call of God, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. We need to be able to drive with our dashboard. I have a friend who in college made the comment he had a real conviction about his speeding habits. He had a little lead foot, and he had some serious problems with getting speeding tickets around the Cincinnati area. And I spoke to him one day, and he said, I've solved it. Don't worry, I fixed it. You've learned to restrain yourself. You're kind of paying attention to the dashboard. He said, no, I just took the speedometer needle off. That doesn't really solve it. That doesn't really fix it. You see, we need to make sure the mission is measurable and that we can actually say, are we or are we not making progress on it? Which means, number 3, sometimes our mission needs to be re-engineered. Sometimes the way we were seeking to fulfill our mission used to work, used to be relevant, used to impact our communities. But let's be honest, if I said, how has your community changed in the last 10 years? And how are you changing your ministry to reach out to those changes, to address those needs, to reach those new people in your community? Yes, we may have a focus on mission, but to make sure it does not get lost, we need to routinely practice re-engineering it, re-expressing it, changing our ministry to fit our mission. And the fourth practice that we really need to do is to assess our mission fulfillment. Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, simply talked about 5 disciplines that need to be done to move from being a good organization to a great organization. And the third discipline that he brings up is that we have to confront the brutal facts. Now hear that. Confront the brutal facts. We need to assess our mission fulfillment. Are we really doing it? The late Dr. Joe Ellis of Cincinnati Christian Seminary used to walk into the room with the faculty gathered, write on the board the mission statement of the seminary, and say, are we doing it? Are we fulfilling it? No excuses. And that's what we need to do in our churches. This is our mission. This is what God has called us to do. This is our wildly important goal. We are going to get rid of the dangers, and we are going to continue to focus on those things that will reinforce, re-engineer, make our mission measurable by assessing its fulfillment with no excuses. We will not look at the facts and dismiss them. We will not make a decision based on ease or popularity, but rather by asking the question, is it in support of our mission? Because when we can maintain mission focus, we can lead the church effectively. So lead well.